In any case, today's call it mini class or whatever is about Islamic anti-Semitism. Many people, we know of anti-Semitism in the West and think about it, as it comes out of Europe and Christendom. There's no doubt. Of course, I'll teach on anti-Semitism in 2025. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with the roots, right? Also worldwide. But today, just a brief view of Islamic anti-Semitism, which begins in the year 624. That's after Muhammad, the prophet messenger, began his mission. It's around 610. He at first tried to encourage Jews to follow him as the last prophet of the Jews, but this was not successful. He actually fled Mecca after he attacked his own people, his own tribe. It was a very cosmopolitan area, and he was quite radical. Okay, he fled to Medina. It's there he runs into Jewish tribes. Is somewhat of an arbiter at the beginning between them and pagan tribes. Not going to go into it. We have that in the course. We'll get into it much, much more. And when he presents himself as a Jewish prophet, he's ridiculed, and they don't believe him. And the Jews say, listen, we don't have any more prophets. You'll notice, we'll discuss, there are many, many mistakes in the Quran when they're discussing Jewish theology and history. Okay, and that's where many of the clashes come in. Muslims, of course, say these all came as corrections. In any case, in his battles against the Jews in Medina, 2 Jewish tribes were expelled, and another one was completely destroyed. In essence, the first jihad. The Beni Qurayza tribe, all the men were executed, right? Beheaded. And we know they still use beheadings today, comes from that. And we're talking about from 600 to 900 men. And the women and children were forcibly Islamicized, forced to convert. Many of the women were taken as concubines, not even as wives. And we get this issues of sexual slavery, something else we'll be discussing. I was actually doing quite a bit of work on it today for one of the classes we'll be giving. And that's where you see the behavior that you saw on the 7th of October. It goes all the way back 1400 years and continues throughout the centuries in conquests, both east through Persia and India, Persia being Zoroastrian at the time, and India, Hinduism, but then all the way to the west, all the way through North Africa and into Spain and the Balkans and whatnot, right? The behavior repeats itself. And the last time it was done was last October. Unless, obviously things could have happened that we don't even know about in other parts of the world since then. And you know what? I'm pretty sure they have. All right. Jews are accused of breaking the covenant with God and Torah, and that's why we were expelled from the Holy Land, the land of Israel, twice over. And they say we have no right to come back. And of course, we're back, and that's what makes the issues even harsher. And yes, we will get to that, of course, chronologically towards more at the end of the course, but we'll remind ourselves of it. We ended up with a subservient status, not even second class sort of community, but very subservient. And it discussed several times in the Quran that Jews will go to the hellfire, meaning go to hell, and that some actually won't, because they will understand that Islam is superior, and they'll also follow their scriptures as ascribed by Islam, let's say, and they could be saved. But essentially, everybody is going to hell. All right. And by the way, it applies for Christians as well. Something I'll have another mini class I'm planning on doing on behavior towards Christians. So Middle Ages. Okay. So just historically, Rambam, and here we have a sketch of him. Okay. Whether it's really him or not, there's always that discussion. It was drawn many, many years later. But in the 1100s, a severe persecution of the Jews. And Rambam, to quote him, the Arabs molest, debase, degrade, and hate us. And he has long quotes, fairly long quotes about just how horrible it is trying to live within the midst of an Arab Islamic world. And he speaks about Jews pleading for peace but failing. Many Muslims accuse the Jews of being aligned with the Dajjal or the devil, or that the Dajjal or the devil is actually Jewish. That's a minority opinion, but the alliance is there. Okay, also that Jews are aligned with the pagans who are trying to undermine monotheism. Next slide. Okay, now what else happens? Just to give a bit of a background per community in Yemen, do you know that Jews were the latrine cleaners? and that was since the mid 1600s. Jews had to carry out dead carcasses of animals, people, not Muslims, okay, but carcasses or cleaning the street. It was horrendous. Okay, there was also an expulsion of Jews at one time because there were those who believed the Messiah was on his way in the 1600s, and when that was made known, Jews were expelled from Ma'uza, and 75% of them died. They were expelled to an area with barely any water. All right, and harsh conditions. In Persia and Iran, Jews were considered polluted. You couldn't touch a Jew. If a Jew touched you by mistake, you could beat him half to death. And we have evidence of that in documents that come down to us. Persecutions in Mashhad and Shiraz, even into the 19th century, the 1800s. There were times when Jews were forced to convert. The community just had to, okay? And people don't know this. They figured, they say, okay, it's not good for Jews today, but it had been quite horrendous previously. And only under the Shah, right, in the 20th century were things better. But even then, a lot of discrimination, even if it wasn't legal, right? Iraq suffered discrimination, heavy taxation, on and off, mainly on, from the time of the 700s into the 19th century. And even then, when Jews got equal rights, right, under the British who were there after World War I and up towards World War II, resulted in the Farhud, which was a big massacre under a pro-Nazi government. 180 Jews killed, Jewish quarters sacked, right? Ransacked, destroyed. Okay, here we have a bit of a map, shows you Iran, Iraq, and Yemen, 3 areas we spoke about. And I'll just continue with another word about North Africa, because often we hear that in North Africa, things have always been better. And sometimes people say Moroccan Jews speak about it. Next slide, please. Moroccan Jews speak about it, that their communities, we always got along with the Muslims around there. It's not exactly true. When you get deeper into the history, okay, it's true that Hassan, I think it was I don't remember which one, the 6th or whatever, that treated the Jews well. But now if you go before that, in 1912 was one of the biggest series of pogroms that took place in Morocco. And the plunder, rape, pillage, massacres, what happened there? We're talking not much more than 100 years ago. People don't think of it, the 20th century. But it certainly happened, just like the Farhud. Right? And this is because a very negative image of Jews and behavior towards Jews is quite vile at times. And even if you were supposedly had equal rights, people did not view Jews as equal to others. And that continued for sure, 1948 and beyond, the persecutions, once it was the state of Israel. And we had it throughout the Arab world, where there were close to 1 million Jews living in the Middle East and North Africa. Okay, and that doesn't mean just the Arab world. You also had Turkey and Iran. Okay, there were persecutions, discriminatory legislation. Turkey had it, right? People don't know that. Extra taxation, on and on. And we see how the Turks behave today. We'll get into that also. Where does Erdogan get this behavior? Well, it's very much rooted in, call it the Ottoman understandings that were had up into the 19th century. And they remain even beyond, even if legally weren't said to be that way. This is how people feel and behave. Okay. And of course, the stereotypes. You see, we have a devil figure here. The biggest problem is stereotypes or demonization. Jews were seen as cunning, sly, and close-hearted. They're traitors. You can't trust them for anything, and they're aligned with the devil. And there are those, as I mentioned before, said the devil, the Dajjal, is even a Jew. And all those who have been secular, like Ataturk, right? Father of modern secular Turkey, which is diminishing before our eyes, was considered to be a Jew or a Jewish agent. Those who went to make peace with us, like Sadat, said to be Jewish. Even Assad was accused of being Jewish, and you'd be surprised, Yasser Arafat as well. Okay? Because anything that's not good, there's a Jew standing behind it. Okay? Which, of course, brings us to that modern Islamic anti-Semitic mix. If you go into Hamas Covenant, Article 22, traditional Islamic revilement, starting with that, and mixed with the czarist protocols of the elders of Zion, right? So they borrow from the Christian world, and they borrow all these conspiracy theories, whereas Jews are controlling the world and Jews are behind everything that's evil and behind revolutions. They accuse us of even running the United Nations, international organizations, civic organizations, controlling the empires, whether it was Britain and France, and later on the United States and the Soviet Union. We haven't yet been accused of running the People's Republic of China, but don't worry, that'll be there eventually as well. And of course, this Nazi racial theory, even though they didn't have racial theory, it was considered the essence of the Jew. The behavior of the Jew shows his evil intent, and that's the way he is. That's the way he or she was born. And today we see very much the demonization of Israel and Jews on college campuses, which we have to remember anti-Semitism. And in the course that I'll teach in 25, anti-Semitism has always been started as an intellectual movement. It begins with the academics. It begins with the power elite, right? You can go from, some people start with Pharaoh, but I would rather go, it's easier to prove, go to the Greeks, go to the Romans, and then right through, right? In the ancient world, it's almost always at the top. It's not some person who's not well educated that suddenly decides he doesn't like Jews. Okay, it was the Catholic Church or the mosque organizations. That's where it's from. And now you have it, of course, academia, college campuses, which is extremely dangerous. Say that 1 out of every 3 students on college campus holds a negative view of the Jews. Think about that. Right? That really is horrific.